All right, we're on air. It is Thursday, May 2nd, and this is a meeting usually reserved for all of the active work we have going on for Backdrop Core. But because yesterday was May 1st and that was code freeze, we did a ton of stuff recently, and I'll go through that. But we are dropping a lot of other stuff off of this agenda because we have more exciting things to do today, which we'll get to later. All right, so starting off with what was merged recently, we had a fix to the translation PO files. This was something that Olaf noticed when he was working on writing up instructions on how to get translations from Drupal.org's translation server to work on your Backdrop site. Then he went and tested the same thing from BackdropCMS.org's translation server, and he noticed that one of the first steps is like change the file name of the archive you got, which seemed a little silly. So we updated Backdrop Core so that it no longer requires you change the file name. It'll check for files with the Drupal extension, the Backdrop extension, or just like zipped up. So I think it'll be much easier for people to get translations onto their site now, which is good. We have one issue remaining, I think, about right to left issues in CKEditor, at least one with the pull request. That pull request is currently marked needs review. I think I originally wrote it and then Gregory fixed something that I hadn't gotten right. And so great if somebody else could review it other than Gregory and myself. That's issue number 3504. And then this is one that I would love to see get in sooner rather than later, is that right now, if you have a security release for Backdrop Core and you are running Backdrop 111, there is a secure version of Backdrop 111 for you, but your website will still yell at you as though that version is not secure because it expects there to be only one recent secure version instead of two. So this comes from our switch to semantic versioning. It wasn't written for that, but we need to make it so that it is. That issue in the queue is number 3524. There's no pull request there yet, but it does look like there's an outline in the issue for what the code should do if anyone is interested in writing that. And those are all of the high priority issues we have slated for the bug fix release 1.12.7 that will coincide with the big release 1.13. But of course, there are a gazillion other bug fixes that could use review. They're all in the 1.12.7 milestone. And the way that it works to get a bug fix release slated for a milestone is it needs to have a pull request on it. And as soon as that bug fix has a pull request on it that's in a testable format, then you can add the milestone, or anyone can add a milestone for the next bug fix release. So the only issues that should that don't have pull requests that are tagged for a milestone are ones that we have deemed significantly important. And a good example of that one is this one that will allow multiple equivalent security releases. So it's important to note that. All right, so items for 1.13. Guys are so excited, I can tell. Dashboard got merged. That's issue number 495. Yay! Yay. So that was something that it was sitting in a needs tests state for a very long time. And Nate took it over this weekend to start doing a code review. And he was like, oh my God, the code, it's a mess. And so I think our takeaway from that is that we should do code reviews earlier. Just getting more eyes on the code is good. And there's a couple of reasons the code was a mess. Number one, I wrote it all for Drupal, and I had introduced a couple of issues that had never been noticed in the Drupal version, which I will now go and fix now that Nate has code reviewed my Drupal module. But some of the other ones were just left over from the fact that when Doc Wilmot, I think, first wrote this, he just wrote it as a proof of concept. He's like, hey, look, you can take this Drupal module and turn it into a Backdrop module. Isn't that great? And everyone was like, yes, we love it. Let's go. But we didn't ever stop to think about, like, oh, in Backdrop, like maybe, you know, we have classes now for blocks. Maybe we should use those if we're putting in new stuff. So it wasn't really that it was a mess so much that, like, we just could do it differently. And so Nate took some time this weekend to kind of reformat it and make it more Backdrop friendly. And so he did that. And then at some point, there was a magic test fairy that showed up and wrote a bunch of tests for it. My theory is that it might be Jonathan Daggerheart, because he was writing tests during the sprint. But I was like, Nate, you wrote all these tests for the module. And he was like, I didn't write any tests for the module. Didn't you write the tests for the module? And I was like, no. So we're like, some fairy came out of nowhere and made like magical fairy tests appear in the issue. So that was really helpful. He did a couple of things to the tests, like switched it from running the regular profile to running the testing profile. And then he kicked it over to me once the tests were written but failing. And then I was able to go through and sort of fix all the tests so that they weren't failing. And then together last night, we helped iron out a couple of unrelated test failures, like with module installation or the administrative pages or whatever else. So I think we got all of the tests passing, woohoo, right around 10 p.m. So we didn't quite make our 9 p.m. East Coast cutoff time, but because we've been putting in so much work on that module, I think starting even on Friday last week, he decided that was fine and merged in anyway. And then we had dinner at 10:30 p.m. because we were trying to get that in. But I thought that was okay sacrifice. There were a bunch of people on chat at the same time. Gregory was offering to like review stuff for us, which was really great. So thank you everybody for jumping in and helping us get those last few issues sorted out. Now, it's in, it's not perfect. We have 15 days to perfect it. So anyone wants to pull down or clone the latest version of Backdrop Core and give it a test, we have time to find and fix any other issues that may have come up. If there is weird stuff on the dashboard that you don't find useful, we can take it off. If there's other things on the dashboard that you would want that are more useful, we can create subtests so that those can go in the next release. We just sort of need to get an idea of what it is people want on their dashboard. I went and did a quick comparison with WordPress. I've got a clone of Joomla, but I haven't set it up. But I would love to get some sort of more comparisons to other things that are out there and make sure we're providing things that are useful. So yay, dashboard. Whew. There's a couple of other things that went in 113 as well. We had an issue for field formatters that were available in Drupal 6 that were dropped in Drupal 7 that we have put back into Backdrop. In particular, when you have a taxonomy term, you can now have like a comma-separated list of tags rather than just having like a stacked list of the way Drupal 7 normally formats fields where they're all kind of go in separate divs. And so this came from a contrib module that we were running in Drupal, in Backdrop, also in Drupal 7, called something formatters, field formatter settings. But because that's a contrib module for Backdrop as well as for Drupal, we need to include the upgrade path, just like we said we would, and document the fact that this contrib module has been merged into Core and that the upgrade process will be handled by Core for you. So there is a follow-up issue for that one. It is number 3742 to get that upgrade path sorted out, and that one needs to get done before 113 is released. Another one that was merged is getting translatable strings defined for all core config files. So this is number 3455. I think Herb Dole did a bunch of work on that. Nate was able to get that reviewed and merged in last night. And then there are a couple of other things on the radar here that went in that weren't necessarily on our agenda every week, but we got vertical tabs added to the taxonomy term page. We got an entity access API. So this is something that entity access function was added by entity API module in Drupal 7, but had been missing from Backdrop. So we've got that now in Core. So we're basically making Backdrop Core more equivalent to the Drupal 7 entity API module, which is going to make upgrading easier. And there's a ton of other stuff. If you want to check the issue checker for 113.0, you can see, I think there's 4 tasks remaining that we can get in before code freeze before release date. And everything else has been bumped to either the next milestone if there had been activity on it recently, or if there hadn't been any activity on it since the last major version or minor version of Backdrop came out. It got bumped entirely, but I did add the milestone candidate onto it. Anything that has been in a milestone that's been bumped, I think should have a milestone candidate tag on it, because that means at one point it was a priority. If it needs to become a priority again, I think that's always a good option. So speaking of milestone candidates, this was something that we invented. I think Doc Wilmot came up with the idea recently to help us figure out what should be a priority for Backdrop Core. And rather than just talking about it by ourselves in this meeting every week, we thought it would be really good to make this a more open process where anyone who's working on Backdrop can tag an issue as being something that they think is a priority. And as long as multiple people agree that this issue is a priority, we can put it onto our list. So what I thought would be a fun thing for us to do in our meeting today would be to review all of the issues that are marked as milestone candidates for the next minor release. So Tim, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at this list yet, but I did post a link into the Twitter chat. I'll post another one in case anyone wants to have a look. Oh, good, Nate's back. Yay!
Hello. Sorry, I had another meeting. Yeah. Did you already go over all of the 113 items?
I did. I did not get to any of the 114 craziness. We are now on the it's time to review the milestone candidates section. But did you add anything about the 113 stuff since you didn't get to do a little woo with us earlier when we did it?
Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to woo real good was entity access, which is probably the last item that you guys just talked about. Big thanks to Moonray, who basically single-handedly put all of that together, and then we just kind of made minor adjustments over the intervening months to get that completely ready. So that's very exciting. That's a nice, helpful thing that could help move forward our references work. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, I think I also ran into an issue with that recently in Drupal 7 where they didn't have an entity access function. So I had to essentially copy the entity access function out of the entity API module and put it into the module that I was using because I needed to do that. So just the fact that like that's so necessary for contrib that there's like a gazillion copies of that function, I think is going to be really handy for backdrop contrib too. All of it.
But other than that, no, I don't think so. I mean, assuming that adequate woos were had regarding like dashboard and field formatters. There are a couple of follow-ups. Translatable strings, we can continue following up. Like we put in that initial issue, but really as far as end user experience, like there's nothing new because we've had the translatable strings and config files for all of 112. But this will make it so that 113 actually has some files that use it, but still the end user experience is going to be the same and translator experience is going to be the same until the POTX module gets updated. So that's just kind of like continuing to move towards a complete solution for config translation and localization, the localization website. So yeah. All right, let's. If you want to go into 114.
No, we can't do 114 yet.
Oh, what?
First, we have to look at the. So I thought this would be really fun today because I thought there were going to be a whole bunch of people that were like, "Woo!" and then we would get to look at what our future should be. So I have this issue here that's like, let's look at our milestone candidates because what we decided to do, I think between the last minor release and this one, was to start tagging issues that we thought were a priority with this label. And then before we set our agenda for the next release, we would review the label and figure out what we thought was important. So I don't think anyone has done any homework on this except for me because I didn't tell anyone that it was time to do it. But I did review a handful of the issues that were tagged with this label, and I noticed a sort of a pattern where there were a lot of issues around security that I thought might be, this might be a good opportunity to make a focused release. We talked about doing that a while before, and we kind of slipped off of that pattern because it turned out that not all of our priorities necessarily lined up with a focus. But now that we have this tag, it gives us a sort of an easier view into high level of what people are really wanting on their site, or at least from Backdrop. And so there are a couple here that I wanted to call attention to. Two that were on the issue for 113 but didn't make them were package signing and trusted host patterns, which are both security related issues. There's also a sort of a clamoring for Honeypot and BAN. These are modules that help prevent spam bots from putting comments and logging registers on your site. BAM also prevents a sort of a brute force attack too. If there's like one IP address that's like pummeling your site, you can block it, which could be nice to have. And then two-factor authentication is always a good idea for security. There's been an issue for that. an email obfuscator. This is something where one of my organizations that's running a backdrop site was recently targeted. What do they call it? Spear phishing, where they went to the website, they peeled all of the email addresses off of the contact form, and they crafted an email that looked like it came from me as the president of the organization and sent it to every one of the members of the board for this nonprofit, asking for a secret behind doors, you have to go get me cash cards right now operation, which seems super shady. And the only reason they were able to do that, I think, is because they had crawlers out there that detected, like, here's a page full of email addresses. And so there's something in the old days we used to do is obfuscate all of the email addresses you put on websites so that it would take JavaScript to be able to read them, which would prevent the less savvy crawlers from noticing there were emails on the page and stealing your email and spamming you. Now it's higher risk because rather than just spam, these are now very specific targeted attacks. So I thought it might be good to revisit that, and it turns out there was already a core issue created for adding an email obfuscator. They mentioned feature parity with WordPress. WordPress apparently has a function in there that lets them do it. I was thinking that it should be a field formatter on the email field, but when I thought about those two things together, I'm like, well, if there was a handy function in core that let you, obfuscate anything, this could be part of the filter system that converts an email address into a link. Like, we could put it in so many places where it could be valuable. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possible item for our next release. And then the last one on this list was SMTP. This is a module that will have your backdrop site authenticate for sending outgoing mail. That would prevent mail sent by your site from ending up in people's spam folders, especially if the site that's running your website is not the site that's running your organization's email. It does require third-party integration. So you would have to choose a SMTP provider. That one's a little bit more questionable as being a good core candidate. But I did want to throw those all out there as potential security-related items we could put into the next release. There are also a handful of editorial experience items that did not make the 1.13 release. I thought if we were going to do focused releases, we maybe could set up an editorial release that might come as 1.14, and we could put the things that didn't make 1.13, like save as draft for core, onto the list for 1.15 if 1.14 was going to be security-focused release. So there's also a ton of other interesting issues in this queue. So what I would like to do is let you guys think about this. Let anyone else who's watching this meeting or comes to it later give people some time to look over this list of proposed issues, and then see if we can come to some kind of consensus about what our priority should be for the next release. I think for the next 2 weeks, we'll obviously need to be working on bug fixes and improvements for 1.13, but after that, we will need to sort of figure out our focus for the next release or two. So Nate, do you have any thoughts on this right now? Do you want to not think about it yet, or are you excited?
Well, I do always think it's a good idea for us to look through our previous releases and see which features we have prioritized previously that still aren't part of core, and pull ideas from there. Because if we've prioritized it once, it's probably important. And if it's still not done, it just means we're going longer without some kind of feature that we thought was important like years ago. It probably still is. And so,
well, I had the opposite, where it was like, if it's been on our roadmap a bunch of times and nobody's ever been motivated to work on it, then it's obviously not important. So I don't know. I probably is some issues are not important and some issues are very important and are not getting attention. It's probably some of both.
Well,
yeah, it doesn't hurt to look.
There's this scenario too where it's important, but it's hard, right? So it's just, it's not that people aren't interested in it, they just don't know what to do. And maybe it takes that extra effort to say, like, listen, this is really important in order to get people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just clarification. There are 2 milestone candidate labels, and that link you posted only shows one of them.
Yes, so this is a milestone candidate for the next minor release, which would be for 1.14, 1.15. The other label is for bug fix releases. So generally speaking, any bug fix issue that has a pull request can be assigned to a milestone. But if we have something that's really important that doesn't yet have a pull request, but we still think it needs to be a candidate for a bug fix release, a good example is the supporting multiple equivalent security releases. That one doesn't have a pull request on it, but it's really important, so it's tagged with the next milestone. So that's what the bug fix milestone label is for, so if there's an issue like that.
I just wanted to make sure that was on purpose and not
Yeah.
like an accident.
And I did go through all of the bug fix tags and make sure none of those items were marked as features just before this meeting. And if they were, I reassigned them to the minor milestone. So this should be an accurate reflection of like those types should be in the right place. Nate, do you know on GitHub, is there a way to get an easy list of anything that had been previously tagged with a milestone?
I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So let's see, should we start discussing feelings on what we should do for 114, or do you want to postpone that until next week and let everybody have a little more time to think about it?
Yeah, my capacity is still pretty saturated with 113. We still have a lot of things to kind of button up in the 113 release, and I haven't even with the focus on new features. There's still also like a lot of bug fixes that need to be happening for 113. So I am of the opinion of let's think it over.
Okay. I like that idea. I also think because there aren't that many people in this meeting, we should allow some of our more vocal people on this matter to have say. Nate, do you think it's worth opening a PMC issue and just saying like, hey, here are the milestone candidates? You know, if you have thoughts about what we should do, come participate in the conversation.
Yeah, actually, because this milestone candidate dash minor didn't even exist as far as I know prior to a couple days ago. Is that right?
So we've had the milestone candidate labels.
I know we've had milestone candidate, but this new minor versus bug fix thing.
Yeah, all I did is take all of the issues that were tagged and split them to either one or the other. So
Yeah.
nothing should be lost. But the milestone candidate tag in general, we've had only for this one release. It came out like right after the last release. Step 1 said, hey, shouldn't we have a better way of determining priority? So this is the first time we're using it.
Yeah. So I think that between now and next week, we should go and collect more candidates and put them into this list.
Okay.
And then we should, maybe we should have the PMC not necessarily make a decision, but just like
Weigh in.
do a call to action saying, hey, I mean, it can be community wide actually, like, hey, why don't we start suggesting milestone candidates for the next thing? And then we can look at it next week.
Okay, and that sounds great.
So I think sometime after the last release, we talked about having, you know, like after each release, having opening up the agenda, just what are our priorities in a broad way. And it feels like this is attempting to go in that direction, but this is going at it in that direction by looking at what people have already talked about, as opposed to just like what are setting aside what we've been talking about in the past. What are the biggest issues we're facing right now? You know, like I've heard a lot of talk in the last couple of months about upgradability, right? And so if we were picking a focus or something, is this a good time to be focused on that? It seems like it would have a higher impact in terms of outreach and usership, but.
Yeah, I think all of the issues I've created so far for upgrade path stuff, I've tagged as bug fix releases, so they don't necessarily have to wait. You would be the ultimate decider on that, though, or you are one of the other, core reviewers, because if you look at an upgrade path and you decide it's, more than just converting variables and maybe is a big deal, it needs to wait for a minor release, that also could happen. But I'm starting them all off as bug fix releases because you could be upgrading today and you'd want that fix to be in the next available version. So yeah, some of them might be really hard though.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Tim, that, maybe some of the things we want to prioritize are too broad for an issue, or maybe just they're just not documented in an issue yet. But I'm also kind of thinking that even if it's really broad and not something that's actionable through code or something that we haven't discussed yet, we should probably have an issue for it just to have a record of it. And so if it's something new that we haven't talked about previously, then we should make an issue for it, tag it as milestone candidate minor, and then talk about it during the meeting in which we're going to do all the reviewing.
Well, let me
So to address that issue, Tim, is that I have in all of my organizing of the issue queue this weekend, I did set up projects. So anything that I found that was too big to be a meta issue, there's a project for, and there is specifically one project for an upgrade path from Drupal 7. There's another project for backwards compatibility, and there's one for Drupal feature or Drupal 8 feature parity, WordPress feature parity, and then some other random things like Registix editor and media and stuff like that. So if you are specifically interested in the upgrade from Drupal 7, backwards compatibility and upgrade path would be projects that I would recommend you take a look at. I'm going to throw a link to the upgrade from Drupal 7 one, both into the Gitter chat in the group chat for this meeting, but that's something to look at. And if you come across anything else like this that is too big to handle in a single issue, I would encourage anyone to use the projects section of GitHub to assemble all of the issues that we're working on for any given project. Yes.
Can I suggest something, which is, how about we open I think part of what I'm getting at is a lot of what you're talking about assumes that people have some knowledge of the issue queue and what's going on in it already, right? And just providing some opportunity for people who have no knowledge of what's been talked about before to just say, hey, this is what would be really important to me today.
Yeah.
Just to get it out there, right? Maybe it is already in the issue queue. Maybe there's a history, but not everybody knows that. And it doesn't have to be binding or anything, but it's just sort of a little brainstorming thing. And this could be done outside of the meeting. Like I was just thinking, maybe we should just open up a forum topic.
Yeah.
Right? A forum topic that just says, we're about to start a new cycle. We're preparing for release 1.14. What are the most important issues for you in terms of crop that we should focus on? And just let people give input and none of it's binding or anything, but it's just one source, one data source. Okay.
I think it's great because probably if those people don't know about the issue queue, they'll either be mentioning things we already have issues for that maybe we haven't prioritized that we need to, or they'll be bringing up new things that maybe we don't have issues to and we need to capture. So I love that idea. Would you be comfortable creating that forum post? The initial opener, that would be great.
Okay, that's all I had.
Great. All right, well, Nate, I don't know if you want to do some pruning of old issues. I know a couple of them offhand, like our fieldable file entity bundles is something that's kind of on my mind as being like probably important, but hasn't gotten any attention. And then there was something else too that I think had been on a reference module, had been on and off that list a couple times too. So just figuring out like how to get those things, make sure they have that label on them so they get reviewed every time we're deciding what to work on. Will be good.
Yep, and even if we don't decide to, give them high priority for this release, I think we should add back that tag so that it's in the list.
Definitely, and then we can review them with every next release's priority list too, so we don't get lost.
Yeah,
Love it.
Idea. Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Well, I've lost track of the agenda. It looks like that was it, just talking about what we're going to do in the future, but there is a general discussion open QA section. Does anyone here have anything else we should bring up today to chat about?
I don't know if it was mentioned before, but the color schemes in Basis thing is done and ready for peer review again. So.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'll take a look at that. That makes me excited.
So, yeah.
Right. Well, if there's nothing else, then let's go ahead and wrap this meeting. We've got a lot of browsing of issues and wrapping up of bug fixes for 113, and then an exciting future for 114 and beyond. So thanks guys for coming to this meeting. Thanks Nate for hopping in even though you had another meeting at the same time. Thanks Tim for volunteering to open up the conversation in the forum.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.